Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 word and to the race reaction for the 2024 Italian Grand Prix. I am grinning from ear to ear. Ferrari are back for this weekend at least. How are we all doing? I hope you enjoyed that race. That was a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyed that Grand Prix. Great result as well. Yes, there's some bias there, but very, very happy with the result. The race in total, a little bit in the middle. I thought, oh dear, are we going to have another one of those quiet affairs again? But no, it all came to life and it was super fun. Really enjoyed that and cannot wait to get into this reaction. Yes, Anushka, our delusions did come true. They absolutely did. Hope you're all having a great Sunday. Enjoyed that race and can't wait for what is to come. Obviously, as always, we're going to go through the teams one by one in order of finishing. So top three will be McLaren, McLaren, and then Mercedes, and so on and so forth, all the way through to the final team, which again is going to be Sauber. Unfortunately, there is some big news regarding Kevin Magnussen as well. You've probably already seen it, but we'll get onto that when we get onto K-Mag 2, and I'm just generally looking forward to this one. Don't forget to vote on the poll, by the way. Rate the Italian Grand Prix. 50% of you so far say great, 38% say good, average okay 11%, and bad 1%, which are actually not bad actually for us. Usually we get a much higher score on bad for some reason on some races, but that was great stuff. And thank you very much as well to, I think we got a super chat. Let me just try and find it. It may have disappeared up the chat. Let's have a look. To Sab Mariners fan, who's not from Grimsby, who says, the greatest race of all time. Ferrari wins at home. McLaren screwed up again. The world is healing. Thank you very much, mate, for your super chat. In Italian as well. Look at that. There you go. Very impressive. And your support on the channel, muchly appreciated. Let's get straight on to, I just have to take a breath there. Hello, Stuart. How are you? I know you've got a cold, so you know this could either be awful or dead sexy. How are you feeling, Stuart? And did you enjoy that race?
I'm hanging on there. I've got my Lemsip, so we're going to power through. It's going to be great. Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? It kind of, I was a bit worried in the middle there. I thought, oh, here we go. So bored of this McLaren domination. And then like an M. Night Shyamalan twist at the end. Turns out Ferrari won, stopping all along. Amazing. I always love seeing the Tifosi being able to celebrate at home. They don't get it off as they like, but when they do, they go big. So that was really good fun, and honestly, quite surprising from Ferrari to go bold and actually pull it off, rather than sometimes when you roll the dice, you do come up six.
When was the last time we were talking about a great Ferrari strategy leading to a win? That's not shade, like genuinely asking.
Well, quite. Yeah, they do often fumble the strategy a little bit, but it worked out well. And now Charles has managed to do his home race and his team's home race in the same season, so good for him.
Yes, absolutely agree. That's where we're going to start, obviously, with Ferrari. So Charles Leclerc, if you missed the result, Charles Leclerc has won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza for the second time in his career. I forgot about 2019, bizarrely, that battle with Lewis Hamilton and all that noise afterwards. Fantastic race. Absolutely bang on Ferrari with the strategy. Great time management with Charles Leclerc. Nobody today, at the front at least, seemed to think that the one stopper was doable, and he nailed it and Ferrari nailed it. So huge credit to them for that. In terms of notes, great start. Took advantage of the McLaren fight at turn 2, or the second chicane, which we'll get to shortly, to sort of nip up the inside of Lando Norris at the first Lesmo, and that was sort of where it looked like he might end up. And then I think Lando Norris got the jump in the pit stops, and it looked like it was all falling apart. Then the McLaren's pitted, and Ferrari thought, you know what? Let's go for it. As Carlos Sainz said, actually, tyres were nearly gone, but I guess we try. It's something they had to do. Like I say, roll the dice. How does Martin Brundle put it? Rolled a double six, and it worked. They threw the dice and rolled a double six, and there you go. So sometimes it works. Sometimes, like you say, Stuart, you end up looking an absolute fool, but they nailed it today. It's just the tyre management has blown me away. And I think Karun Chandler made a really interesting point afterwards in the Sky coverage, that actually maybe that cloud cover today with the rain sort of in the area cooled the track down a bit and maybe helped them with the tyre management, because maybe on a hotter day, like we saw earlier in the weekend, those tyres don't get to the end. So amazing stuff. Obviously, I'm very happy with the result. Of course I am. A little bit of a shame Carlos couldn't make the podium, but he didn't seem to be able to manage us quite, so I didn't have the advantage either that Charles had at the front, but just really well done from Ferrari, and I can't really fault anything Leclerc did today at all. Not that I want to, ever, of course.
No, it was kind of a perfect drive, really. He made it work. I couldn't believe the pace he was still able to do on those tyres at the end. I mean, he was losing a second and a half to Piastri, but apart from when Piastri was in traffic, but it was enough. I was getting concerned we were going to end up with some kind of Silverstone-esque blowout at the end, but luckily it's not particularly fast corners around here, so he got away with it. It was great. He made it work. I'm very surprised Sainz wasn't able to do the same, especially as he went a bit longer and seemed to be kind of being a bit more in a one-stop headspace at the beginning. When people started stopping around lap 13 to 16, he was like, these people are going to have to stop again. We should go long. And he went all the way to lap 20, which was one of the later stops of the medium starters, but for some reason just couldn't keep it together. And he said something really interesting, actually, that maybe I didn't quite follow, but he said Leclerc stopping earlier on lap 15 was what helped him get the hard tyres to the end, because he could manage through the sort of grim period in the middle and bring them back again or something. That's what he seemed to be saying. And I don't quite understand how that works, but that seems to be what Sainz was suggesting. And of course, Leclerc had cleaner, easier air up ahead. But yeah, really nice to see Ferrari able to do something. Really nice to see their upgrades working. We'll see if they work outside of Monza being quite a unique track in itself, but Baku not too different from Monza really, with its long straights and chicanes, but you do need a bit of downforce through the middle section. But yeah, it's interesting. If Ferrari start getting in this fight, then things are going to get great, I think, for the rest of the season. We're going to turn up every single weekend and not have a clue who's going to win.
Well, they're in the constructors' fight, aren't they? For sure. They're about 39 points behind Red Bull now. So it's not. They're in it. I think they're in it. I'm not sure about Charles Leclerc bringing himself into the Drivers' Championship fight, but certainly the constructors, they've got a chance, but they're going to need to do this more consistently. Obvious statement, I suppose. But the other thing I found interesting about Charles Leclerc was that at one point in the race, he seemed really annoyed at the strategy, didn't he? He was sort of saying that, why have you pitted me? If you knew I was going to get undercut, why have you pitted me? It doesn't make sense. You should have left me out or whatever. But as it turned out, it all worked out fine in the end. So I'm sure he's pretty happy with it now. But at the time, he was quite annoyed, and I thought, are we doing this again, Ferrari? We're really going down this road? And fortunately not. But emotional across the line, obviously, just a Tifosi. And we got what is, in my opinion, the best podium combination of national anthems that we can possibly have in Formula One. The Monegasque national anthem is really bouncy. The Italian one is as well. So it all kind of worked. So a party atmosphere on that podium, the best podium in the world as well for me, over that crowd. And I think they're saying on Sky that the crowd went all the way down to turn 1 and were 300 metres the other side of the podium as well. So absolutely insane scene. So amazing for Charles. Great drive, great strategy, great tyre management. Not really anything else in my notes, because he just sort of probably would have ended up third or fourth today had he not got it right with the strategy, but they managed to make it work and took a win. So it's a big win, like you say, Stuart, the big two, Monaco and Monza for Ferrari. So obviously Carlos Sainz won Australia too. Let's not forget that one. I feel like he's getting a bit forgotten at tyres, bless him. But yeah, he did win that one. So good stuff on Carlos Sainz as well. Pitted end of lap 19 for hard tyres. Stuart was giving you a bit of info there on Sainz and thinking that others were pitting too early. He pitted end of lap 19, so lap 20 for hard tyres, and lap 45. Sorry, as I said earlier. But I guess we have to try, even though the tyres were gone. And that's kind of the story for Ferrari today, isn't it? They kept themselves in play. I think, kept themselves in play. Went long, took a risk. It paid off. Another day you look really stupid. Today it worked perfectly. I'm just very, very happy. I don't know what else to say. I've not got a lot in my notes for Ferrari, because it was one of those races where they were there and they were in the battle and they were keeping themselves in the mix, but they needed to try something. I don't think they would have won today without they didn't seem to have the pace to quite get McLaren without that strategy play. So I keep smiling. I've not smiled like this since Monaco. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, the scenes as well, just incredible at Monza, aren't they? And one of the best on the calendar. But I don't know if you've got anything in your notes, Stuart, that's something that I've not picked up on that's really important that we need to go over for Ferrari. I don't want to just gloss over them at all, but I didn't take many notes in the end because I was a bit bouncy in my chair and celebrating.
And rightly so. I know you're always waiting for a Ferrari resurgence, and maybe this is it. Yeah, and I think it was the right call as well for Sainz to be like, yeah, we have to try, because I think if he finished 15 seconds behind the lead and 9 seconds behind Norris, I don't think he would have got close to that if he'd have pitted, even if he'd have pitted at like a reasonable time. I think this was the best possible thing they could have achieved, even with Sainz dropping down to fourth. So yeah, really made up for them. Really enjoyed Leclerc being in stealth mode with his all black outfit, and rightly so, with him stealing that win, I guess. And I'm just looking forward to see if they can take it further than that. I think, and maybe this helps with the segue, but I think they also benefited somewhat from just mostly getting their head down and getting on with their race, while McLaren was sort of having a thing to deal with, a little bit up ahead. I mean, Charles definitely wouldn't have. Why did I say definitely? Probably would not have won had he not managed to steal that second place at turn 4 when the McLarens had their little squabble. I think that put him in a position to be able to maneuver around this strategy. Maybe not, but he definitely. I think, considering what did he win by, under 3 seconds? Things might have been quite different. Yeah. So things might have been. The arm of my microphone is right in front of the thing I'm trying to look at. Yeah, I think it might have been a bit different. So yeah, interesting. Even though, as you say, Ferrari were kind of trying to mirror McLaren at first, which is what annoyed Leclerc. But then when they realised they sort of weren't in contention, they forced themselves into contention by stopping thinking about McLaren in a way.
Yeah, do you know, sorry, just looking at the times there before I read some comments before we move on to McLaren, but and we can then use that segue. I just realised Sainz is 9.4 seconds behind Norris at the end, so he really did drop off, didn't he, on those tyres? Obviously, McLaren on the fresher rubber were always going to be quicker, but I mean, last lap, he was matching Leclerc at the front, but he was, 121.4 for for Norris, 121.9 for Piastri, 123.2 for Carlos Sainz. 121.5 for Hamilton, who was coming out in quite quickly at the end there. So obviously the one stop was, is it fair to say, borderline? A proper borderline one stop, maybe another lap or two, even just another lap and it's game over. So just great stuff from Ferrari, and it's ace to say that for Jade. AC, thank you very much for your super chat, mate, and your support. Says, when it's God's will to see Ferrari win, even Mother Nature sends her love. There we go. Kaori says, Tifosi were beyond wild, loved it. CPB says, I have a feeling Ferrari are going to nail the new regulations. Carrie says, hit that goddamn like button, people. Absolutely. Please do drop a like for Ferrari and for the stream as well, of course. Helps out with the algorithm. We will get on to K-Mag, I promise you. We will get to him shortly, or when we get there, really. Anushka says, can Ferrari win the Constructors? I think they can, Stuart. Like I say, they're in it, aren't they, now? They've brought themselves into play with that 1-4 today. I think Sky were talking about Sharp bringing himself into play for the drivers. I'm not convinced on that because I don't see that happening. But Ferrari certainly got a shot at this Constructors if they can both hit some consistency, especially with Red Bull, as we'll get to shortly, just dropping like a stone.
Won't it be interesting if Red Bull come third in the Constructors?
Yeah.
What a shocker that would be.
I'm not sure what I'd do with that information, to be honest with you, if it came. that would blow my mind. That would make some interesting post-season content, wouldn't it? But let's move on to that point then that you were talking about down at McLaren. I'll find the pitch will crop in a minute for McLaren, I'm sure. Oscar Piastri P2 from second on the grid. Lando Norris P3 from first on the grid. It all really came down to the second chicane, didn't it? Good start from Piastri. Sort of challenging Norris a bit, but Norris seemed to get off the line much better than he has at other Grand Prix from pole positions. That's good for him. Down to turn one, a little bit of a challenge, but I thought, Oscar just tucking in. Let's get this first couple of laps out of the way, look after the cars, build a gap, and then we can sort of control the race from there. And then just what felt at the time like a banzai move down the outside of that second chicane, turn 4 officially, past Lando Norris. Norris gets a bit of a slide on, very, very close between them. I think it was described by Zach Brown as hard or aggressive but fair and clean. And then that cost Norris the place to Charles Leclerc, got at the inside of the first Lesmo at turn 5, I believe that would be. I'm used to corner names for Monza. I struggle with the numbers. And then Oscar Piastri sort of drove away quite a bit, didn't he? He seemed to control the race quite nicely. Charles Leclerc stayed close. Piastri deployed the pace when he needed to. And I think when you look at, and we could take, it's easy to say this because we have to consider as well, Lando Norris fell into traffic, which obviously is going to affect his pace. But for big chunks of that race, Oscar Piastri looked like the quicker of the two. So maybe would have had quite a fight for the win at the front between those two had Norris kept that lead. But it would have been interesting to see what Norris did in clear air, of course. But I think the big debate seems to be, should McLaren have stepped in and either stopped that happening before the race started, or should they have called team orders and swap the drivers around, if not earlier in the race, certainly at the end to get Lando Norris those extra 3 points. Sky kept making the point constantly about how Lando Norris lost 10 points in Hungary and Monza, and so that's why that could be critical in the championship fight. I don't know what to say, to be honest, Stuart, because 1 week people bemoan team orders and say they're terrible for the sport, and then the next week they're screaming for them to happen. So I don't really know what people want. I think that move from Oscar Piastri was very hard. It was aggressive, but it was fair. There was no contact. If he buffs Lando Norris into the gravel trap, it's a different conversation, isn't it? But I think it's a hard and fair move. They're allowed to race, as drivers have at McLaren for, I think, pretty much all of my time watching Formula One. I mean, you go back to Senna versus Prost just before my time watching. They were allowed to race. You look at Hakkinen and Coulthard; they were for the most part allowed to race. You look at Hamilton and Alonso; for the most part, they were allowed to race. Sure, Hamilton and Alonso maybe cost themselves a title in 2007 with the battling, but there we go. That's how it happens. Good comparison there potentially, but I'm not sure how. I think. I'm not sure McLaren are convinced they could win the drivers. I think if McLaren knew for sure they could win the drivers' championship, I think they would have made the swap. But I'm not sure why they're not convinced, because, as I've just touched on, with Red Bull dropping like a stone, surely with that gap of 62 points, they're in this. We've still got 8 races to go, Stuart, and some really tricky races potentially for Red Bull coming up. In fact, I was going to do this when I get to it, but I'll read it now. Max Verstappen was asked about the upcoming races and where they might be strong. He said, if we don't change something on the car, then it's all going to be bad from here. He knows he's going to struggle unless something changes on that car. So maybe McLaren need to start believing. But I don't want them to be moving Oscar Piastri out of the way, and as we saw in Hungary, cocking up with strategy, having to move Lando Norris out of the way. I don't like that, even as a Ferrari fan who benefited with the Michael Schumacher years from team orders. It's not something I want to see all the time. But I'm just not convinced that Oscar Piastri's done anything wrong there. I don't know if some of it's because of where I get my information when I'm watching a race. I don't know, but I feel like it might be a bit of a storm in a teacup. But I can also see, Stuart, people coming back to this stream in 3 months' time and picking this up and going, hang on, Sean, Lando's just lost the championship by 3 points. Yeah, where do you stand on this? Do you think they should be swapping these drivers around and prioritising Lando, or do you think they're right to let them race? I want to see them race, but I kind of see the argument for there is a championship potentially to fight for here.
I think there's some quite subtle points and differences between what McLaren could be doing, and I kind of see a lot of it. I'll tell you where I stand with this. I think yes, there is a chance Lando could take Verstappen. I think it would take a lot of really good Lando results versus a lot of really bad Max results, could quite consistently over the rest of the season for that to happen. So it's sort of an outside possible chance. I'm aware sort of Red Bull are on the downfall and McLaren are on the upsurge at the moment. So that I am aware there could be a time at the end of the season when McLaren look back and Lando is 5 points off winning the Drivers' Championship, and they're like, we should have prioritized him more. But at this point in time, looking forward, I understand why they're like, look, the Drivers' Championship is a big maybe. The Constructors' Championship is the yes, we can absolutely grab this. And Oscar and Lando are both really great drivers. We both want them to be number one, and we should let them race. I think what they did in the first couple of corners, sort of based up to Varianti, up to the second chicane, it seemed to be what was in the plan from what was discussed afterwards. It seemed to be like, make it as a team, make yourself as wide as possible, bring Oscar out so nobody can get past us. It's kind of what Mercedes did in Silverstone. When they were on the front, they just make themselves as a team wide, work together to make sure they don't either of them get taken off the start, and then go from there. I think in a sensible world, thinking only of the team thing, I'm not actually that bothered about prioritizing Norris over Piastri, but I think in a team world, I think the very, very sensible thing to do is hold station for a few laps, build a gap, and then let's see where we are. But I don't begrudge Piastri absolutely having a go when he sees the opportunity. And I think it's important for him to slam down a big message saying, I am not going to be number 2 in this team. Lando is well ahead of me in the drivers, really. I know he's sort of had a better run so far, but I'm not going to be considered the number 2 in this team, sort of, and then start being like subconsciously deprioritize, I'm not going to fall into the Valtteri Bottas role kind of thing. But I also kind of agree with Lando, not to the extent, because he was really annoyed in the press pen. But but in saying that it was too much, it was a big risk. Half a meter this way or the other. If he'd have braked slightly later, then they could have both been out, or one of them could have been out. I think it was a big risk, as when they're fighting as a team. So I get there's kind of subtleties here. I kind of enjoy letting them race. I think they both deserve race wins over the next 9 races, and I don't think they could justify to Piastri fully prioritizing Lando, and maybe that will come back to bite them at the end of the season when they realize how close they actually did get. But right now, I think it's fair to let them race. But I do think they need to make sure they're doing it in a way that doesn't cost them any positions like it did today. I quite like this. We don't know exactly what it is, but this papaya rules thing where, they're allowed to race, but be fair, don't touch each other. I'm assuming it's, don't get too close, don't run each other off the road or be too aggressive, leave each other room. I'm assuming that's the kind of thing it is. I quite like it as a philosophy and having a sort of mantra that they can be reminded of over the radio, what they agreed to. I'm assuming there was a big meeting behind the scenes. These are the rules of engagement. These are what we all agree to, and I'll remind you of that in the race should we need it. Does that make sense? I think the priority should be the team thing right now, and if Piastri can steal a win, he can steal a win. I think that's just what it's got to be. But again, there could be egg on the face at the end of the season. But I think with the information we have right now, I think that's the fairest thing.
No, I totally agree. I don't think this is as black and white as some people are making it. I agree with you. There are subtleties to it. That it's not as simple as they absolutely should prioritise Lando or whatever, or they should be swapping positions, or they should be telling Piastri to hold station. Because that also, you've got to set a precedent. You've kind of touched on it there, Stuart. Sets a precedent for the rest of Piastri's career at McLaren. If he starts dropping off and letting Lando go and holding station, then you're going into next year with, at the moment, looking like McLaren could be the team to beat, and a drivers' championship on the table from the start of the year, and he's just gonna should he just sit there just doing as he's told? No, we don't want that. We want to see him racing, but at the same time, you've got to think if there's a shot at the drivers, you go for it. But I will say this: Norris today scored 16 points. Max Verstappen scored 8 for a win in second place. Norris needs to win every race, and if he wins every race between now and the end of the season, and Verstappen finishes second, he wins the championship. There was still the same swing today with the 7 points between the two, and then the 1 point for fastest lap. So it's still an 8-point swing in Norris's favour. So even if they don't employ team orders, he can still win this if he finishes second to his teammate. If Red Bull continue to be down in 6th, 7th, and 8th place. So I don't think they're at the point now where they need to start changing. But if we get to a point, let's say Red Bull bounce back in Baku or Singapore or when we get to Austin, and suddenly it is Verstappen versus Norris at the front, then I think the conversation changes. When you've got Verstappen starting to win again, if we've got Piastri leading, Norris second place at Mexico, Verstappen's third, Norris needs to win, then you're going to have to start bringing in team orders. But at this stage, I'm not convinced on it. But I know a lot of people disagree. I did see a really good comment, actually, I wanted to read, which is a really good point. NFP Nunn says it isn't about prioritising Norris, it's about managing the race. Norris was in pole. Piastri should have made sure he got a good start and form a buffer between Norris and the rest of the field. From a team perspective, that's what I think a lot of people thought McLaren were going to do, wasn't it? That when we got down to turn 1, I think Martin Brundle said the same in commentary. We got down to turn 1, that looked like what the plan was. Go and build that gap, secure the race, manage it, and then you can go and race if you need to. But the talk in the pen from Lando Norris, he seemed, initially when it was put to him, 2.5 seconds to Leclerc, Piastri to Leclerc, did that turn, that second chicane cost you? Initially you went no, and then he sort of paused and thought about it and was like, well, actually no, with 2.5 seconds, then losing that to Leclerc, he'd have gained that over the race. So that is what cost him the race. So that seems to be where the blame is, if you like, for where this race has gone today. But it does, I will say this as well, it does feel like another one that's got away for McLaren, doesn't it? And maybe it does need to be, maybe there does need to be a bit more, whatever these papaya orders are, there needs to be a bit more, maybe a tweak to them. I love the fact it's, execute order papaya. How cool is that? But, I could see Zach Brown sitting down with Oscar Piastri and Lando tonight or tomorrow and just saying, look, Oscar, great move, really aggressive, but please remember, that's your teammate. You don't need to be going that aggressive. But then, are we as fans bitching and moaning when driver doesn't get aggressive in those situations. So, he's giving us what we want, Oscar. And yes, I'm an Oscar Piastri fan, so I'm biased and I don't care. There's nothing against Lando. I really like Oscar Piastri. He reminds me of a lot of Kimi Räikkönen in the way he is with the media. I've said it before, but there's just something about him I really like. He's a great racer as well. So it's going to be a fascinating few weeks. But I'll read through the notes. That was quite a good chat there about the team orders, and I'll take some of your comments as well. We've kind of touched on all of that. Did have a big lock-up at pit entry, did Lando Norris, by the way. Hit the bollard slightly. A little bit of concern he hadn't slowed down, but he was fine there. Undercut worked on Leclerc and was told you are allowed to race Oscar Papaya rules, of course. Said on lap 30, front left looks pretty bad, then complained a little bit later about not understanding why his front left was dropping off as much as it was. Slowish second stop, 3.3 seconds, rejoining P6 behind Verstappen. Little fight with Max, but I think, and if you go back, by the way, 6 months and you say I said this, Stuart, I'd laugh in your face. Bit of an inevitability there. I think Lando was always going to get past Max, and it was pretty easy, wasn't it, in the end? Max put up a fight initially, but then that DRS kicked in and Lando just breezed past on the straight. That was pretty much it. Told Ferrari one stopping and to just drive ducking fast. That's what I heard anyway. Got sides with DRS on lap 48 for P3. And then Piastri, we've gone through all that again. I've put here close, ballsy, but good move for the lead. That's what I've put. Pitted 2 laps after Norris at the end of lap 16 from the lead. Rejoined just ahead of him in P5. Gap was reduced, though, of course. Second time in lap 38. Slowish again. A lot of slow pit stops today. Rejoining P3 ahead of Verstappen and Norris and overtook Sainz at Ascari on lap 45 for P2. And at that point, was 11.7 seconds behind. So he's pulled back a couple of, 9 seconds in 8 laps. I mean, that's good speed. He had the pace today. So, I've got nothing else to add. Have you got anything in your notes, Stuart, that you picked up in the race that you'd like to cover?
Not too much. I think I will note again that Norris made an error at the second chicane, and that almost cost him a position to Leclerc. I mean, it didn't matter in the end, obviously, but when he was sort of battling with Leclerc before his second stop, he made an error, and he does tend to make one of those errors every race. Not last race, but he is still making little errors here and there that you see less from people like Verstappen. But I think he is still in his growth phase right now. So that's interesting. And I'm not entirely sure. I feel like they lost this race. Like there have been races this season where McLaren have lost it. McLaren had the race in their grasp and they lost it, and I feel like Ferrari stole it. I don't think McLaren could have done very much, to be honest, other than go on a one stop that they didn't think was going to work at the time. I think they couldn't have known early on in this race that maybe the one stop wouldn't have worked for them. I just think Ferrari outfoxed them today, rather than McLaren throwing away what would have been an easy win.
Do you know what, Stuart? I'm going to go with that. I much prefer that outlook. Ferrari won it. McLaren didn't lose it, but McLaren probably could have won it today.
Maybe.
It's an interesting one. But we'll go with, I think, Ferrari won it. They snatched it. I like that one. Thank you again to Sab Mariners fan, who's not from Grimsby. I'll stop that one day, I promise, for your super chats. As Lando really bottled it today. What could have been a massive point swing turned into effectively a first with fastest lap for Lando and second for Max. Thank you very much, mate, for your support. And thank you again to AC for another super chat, who says, blame it on Binotto. He had to seduce Sainz away from McLaren. If Sainz was in McLaren, he would not let McLaren be this mediocre. Ooh, there you go.
Wow.
I'm going to blame Binotto. I'm going to blame everything on Binotto. It's all his fault today. Why not? So that's it for McLaren. And what have we got left there? So top 3, Mercedes. Interesting race for Mercedes today, if not spectacular. Lewis Hamilton finished 5th place from 6th on the grid, pitted end of lap 16, and then for a second time again, lap 37, rejoining P6. I've put relatively quiet race, but was going well. And post-race just simply said, didn't have the pace today, more deg than the cars ahead, was sort of a summary of what he said there. He was coming back at Carlos Sainz towards the end, but it did feel for Lewis Hamilton like one of those afternoons where he was driving well, and he was sort of there and in the mix, and if something had happened ahead or some sort of safety car or something, he could have brought himself into play for a podium, maybe not the win, we'll never know, but he drove well today. But it wasn't something that I'm not going to sit here and pick out 5 moments from Lewis Hamilton's race because I couldn't do that other than the pit stops, the 2 pit stops. I can't really think of not in a negative way, but seeing an awful lot of him, which was one of those races for him. Maybe at no man's landy, actually. 7.1 behind Sainz, 15 seconds clear of Verstappen. Perhaps a bit of that today. George Russell, though, was well and truly in the wars today. We'll get to him in just a minute. But yeah, have you got anything on Hamilton at all, Stuart? Again, I've just got the pit stops and his post-race comments there about not having the pace.
Yeah, no, not really. He was sort of in that middle ground, not quite as fast as the top 2 teams, but faster than the cars behind. So we didn't see him because he wasn't really in any fight. He was through most of the race keeping basically this gapping to Sainz. He was basically, doing the same pace as Sainz was until that last stint when obviously he put on some fresh tires. Dropped about 20 seconds and then closed back up to him again. So essentially nullifying the entire experience. But yeah. Just as you said, very quiet race, about as fast as Sainz, and no more, no less.
There's nothing wrong with that, is there? Nothing wrong with that at all. It just means he's not got himself in any bother. A scrap with Verstappen for a couple of laps, wasn't there, at one stage? But again, that felt like that was only going to go one way at one point. So, it's amazing where we are in F1 at the moment. But yeah, no, I think a good drive from Hamilton overall. A couple of people in chat saying he did well, but I don't think it was one of his. It's not a drive that I'm going to go back and go, oh, do you remember Hamilton at Monza in 2024 where he was just there? But yeah, no, good drive. I'm not criticising him at all. I have to make sure I make that point a couple of times. Ruby's here. Don't want to get told off. Thank you, Lyle, by the way. Lyle Bailey for becoming a new member of the channel. Thank you for your support. I appreciate that one, mate. Thank you very much. George Russell. So what have I got here? I'm going to read the notes because I think this is the best way to try and put his race together. Good start initially. Actually, a really good start initially. Was challenging Piastri. Piastri was slower than expected. George said he came across a bit more than he expected at turn 1. Russell has to take evasive action and touch the escape road and drop down through the pack to P7 with front wing damage. So challenging for P2 into turn 1 potentially and then down to P7. Pitted end of lap 11 for new front wing and hard tyres. 10.5 second stop, obviously because of the wing change. There's some time lost there. Had to go at Perez at turn 1 on lap 31. Couple of those actually with Checo today, weren't they? Cut the chicane. So had to give back potential advantage. Did get close to Perez at the second chicane, but didn't get a move done. Pitted for a second time end of lap 33 for new hards. Again, another slow stop, 4.2 seconds. Sticky nuts, as Crofty put it, on the right rear, which was lovely. And lap 38 was the move on Perez. And I've written here, see Perez notes, because I think that was the one that I'm thinking of, where Checo comes across. It is indeed comes across very late in defence on the run to turn 1. Surprised actually the stewards didn't note that. I'm not saying it was a penalty, but usually that sort of thing that's quite a late move, they tend to sort of say, we'll note that and then we'll think about passing that on, but they didn't in the end. But it was a fun fight between Russell and Perez, but really a race that I think Russell looked like he had a shot of, well, he started top 3, so of course he had a shot at a podium, but I think he had a shot of a really good result today, and it sort of didn't happen for one reason or another, but he just seemed to be involved in anything and everything, and I'm not really much, if any of it, his fault, really. So I feel a bit for him today, actually, down there in 7th place, but his points on the board, so there's a positive there, I suppose. But yeah, what did you make of George today? Scrappy at times, again, not necessarily all his fault.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a shame actually, because he got himself into a really good spot on the grid. And as you were saying that, I was interesting thought I had. Maybe not that interesting. Guess we'll find out. And to praise it, saying not that Oscar did anything wrong at all, but Oscar sort of moving out wide to cover turn 1 and sort of destabilizing Russell. Did that cost Oscar the win? Because that moved the Ferraris up and out of the way. Russell would have been a buffer to them going into the next series of corners. And then maybe they wouldn't have been able to play their interesting strategy games, and the whole complexion of the race might have changed. Maybe not, but it's sort of interesting. Little sliding doors effect there, maybe. Otherwise, yeah, Russell, I think he did the best with the race he was handed after the first turn. He sort of went in a bit. I think he was just surprised by Piastri suddenly being there and the air being destabilized and being a bit suddenly turn 1 was not what he expected it to be. And a shame that he got that wing damage as well. But he did what he could with it. He dropped to 7th and he finished 7th, so he sort of was thereabout. It's maybe a shame he couldn't do anything more with it. Obviously, I think the Mercedes were definitely the third fastest team here today. He probably, I don't think he would have stayed in third had he lasted the whole race without being boofed in turn 1. No, he wasn't boofed. He lost it himself. Some fun scraps. I enjoyed his scrap with Perez. I know it was a bit tight from Sergio. I think a bit of an aggressive squeeze, but Russell backed out, made it work in a later lap. He probably had fun trying to make the best of that race, but yeah, it could have been a lot more. It could have been sort of just ahead of Hamilton, just behind Hamilton around that point. I think they would have been very close to each other by the end of the race had he had a normal one.
It's you've done it against you. Every now and again you do this. You send my mind into overdrive, and actually you might have a point there on whether or not that may have cost Piastri the win, because you're right. It allows a Ferrari through, which maybe Russell would have got Norris at the first Lesmo. Maybe we would have ended up in a similar position. Maybe Russell could have nicked the win, but you're right. Piastri could have. Maybe that did cost him. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Sorry, have a moment. I'll go away and think about that and be thinking, Stuart, you're so good. You blow my mind again. But no, I think Russell could have had a great result today. But I think you make a good point now on whether would he got top 3, maybe not today, because the race pace wasn't quite there. Like you said, great lap in qualifying yesterday. I think one of the standouts yesterday, actually, that lap. But maybe the race pace not quite there for Mercedes today, and so podium maybe a bit much, but top 5 would still have been a cracking result for him. So it's interesting. It's interesting what could have happened, but I feel a bit for him. He raced well. He had good pace. I think he came, when you look at where he finished. I mean, 1.7 seconds behind Verstappen after 10.5 seconds start for a broken front wing. The time that broken front wing would cost him. The time cutting the corner would have cost him. The 4.5 second stop later on, even with Max Verstappen slightly slow stop, George has done a great job to be just 1.7 seconds behind him, all things considered. So I think good pace and a good drive from George, but it's still... The thing is, on paper, it's still P3 to P7, isn't it? So it looks awful, but I think there are positives they can take away. But third fastest team today, do you reckon, Mercedes?
Yeah, I think so. I think easily, yeah. Not as fast as Ferrari, for sure.
Thank you to Lyle Bailey for your super chat as well. Thank you very much. It says Behrman, Schwartzman or Pietro in Baku for Haas. We'll come on to that later, mate. I'll shout you out then if I remember for the question, but I'll read it now just in case I forget. Thank you very much to Ruby for being a member for 14 months in a row now. Thank you very much, Ruby. Says Lewis is the GOAT. I have to say it every stream. Congratulations to us Ferrari fans on our win today. No Ferrari jokes today. I'm sure we'll find one, but no. It's nice to be happy as a Ferrari fan, so good stuff there. I think that's it for the top 3 teams. Stuart, have we missed anything? I'll just have a quick look through chat, and I don't know if we've missed something. I think we've got through them all and covered the main points. Obviously, as always, this is a reaction, not a review, so we're not going to go through everything in huge detail, but we'll get through every team. Sauber could be interesting when we get there. I'm not sure I've got any notes, but we'll see how it goes. Anything else top 3 teams, then, Stuart?
No, I think we covered a lot. Just to say, it's what a world we're living in now, where Red Bull are not in this top 3 summary. But yeah, good, yeah, interesting race, interesting sort of strategic long game race for these 3.
Miss CZ says Piastri would have to blow 70 years of records to reel in a 100 points deficit in 8 races. So there's a little stat for you. There you go. it has to be something special, or a complete and total implosion from Verstappen and Norris, wouldn't it? But yeah. Daniel says, by not having to make a strategy call, this played into Ferrari's hands. Leclerc, nice defensive victory. Defensive victory. Okay. The non-team owners on the first lap cost McLaren a 1-2. So much for repaying Norris. That's MVD. And any more... I don't think so. We'll move on then to Red Bull, 4th fastest again at best. I don't think actually Magnussen was that far off the back of Perez if he put his 10 seconds back on, but we'll get to that shortly. He might have been. I might have been over the top there. But Max Verstappen, P6 today. Sergio Perez, P8. So Verstappen 7th to 6th. Perez 8th to 8th. Did get up to P6 on lap 1 following Russell's off-track moment. Lap 7, told to hold position and let others push on the mediums as hard as they could. That, to me, Stuart, made me think that Red Bull were on a one-stopper the way that was worded, but obviously didn't work out that way. Did get wide at the second Lesmo at one point, kicking up some dust. Kept going, that was well held. Took the lead from Sainz at one point, lap 19 when he pitted. Picked up the pace on lap 21, then pitted lap 22. A very slow 6.2 second stop due to a slow right rear. 2 stops confirmed at that point because he put the hards on. Told to get on with it in the second stint. Pitted end of lap 42 for second stop for medium tyres, rejoining P6 ahead of Magnussen and behind Hamilton. And post-race again said, I'll read it again. I've already read it once. But if we don't change something on the car, then it's all going to be bad from here, referring to the rest of this season. But a pretty... I wouldn't say lonely race because there were people coming back through the first pit stops, weren't there? So he was sort of involved in, he had that little scrap with Lando as well. There was some stuff with Lewis Hamilton, so he wasn't completely lonely out there. Russell was only 1.7 seconds back in the end, but it just, I think the simple summary for Red Bull this weekend is very much like it was for Zandvoort, Stuart. They just didn't have the pace. No pace to challenge those ahead. It's clearly the 4th fastest team, well off in qualifying for one reason or another. And 37.9, 38 seconds off the lead come the end of the race for Max Verstappen. I know there's a pit stop, an extra pit stop in there, but that's still, even if you take that out, that's still massive when you think of where they were. The drop-off is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? Having said it, there was a time in this race, and I think it was about lap 20 maybe, where I thought, are they gonna steal this somehow? Because like you, I thought, okay, they're on the hard tyres. They're sort of sitting pretty, waiting for everyone to burn up their mediums. If they're going for a one stop, while everyone else is now clearly switching to this 2-stop because they've stopped well before lap 20, they'd taken the lead. They had 1-2 in the race at the time because they were the only ones in that top 10 who hadn't stopped. Their pace was okay. I mean, they had good pace and they had comparable pace on the hard tires with the sort of, they hadn't fallen out of the train really in a big way at the start. In excuse me, in the first stint, and I thought, oh my god, are they going to one-stop this and just steal this from everybody somehow? And then they pitted on lap 22, 23 with the hards. They didn't take the hards very far at all, and then they just sort of did a reverse strategy of the McLarens, maybe with the idea that the mediums would be super fast at the end and they could do some big moves. By that point, they were miles behind. So yeah, nothing really. Just grabbing as many points as they can with the situation they had to them, which is just weird for Red Bull. And I wonder if they're... I don't know what's going on with that car, and I think it still might be what we sort of were talking about not the beginning of the season, but that kind of turning point, maybe a third of the way through the season, where have they hit a ceiling with the development of this car in the way that other cars haven't, and they're just not able to keep up anymore. It is really weird, and it's going to be really interesting watching the rest of the season thing. And are they going to be in a, as we've said before, a Braun 2009 situation where they're just clinging on to the lead? Well, in the drivers, I think they're going to lose the constructors, but in the drivers, they're just going to have to cling on as it gets whittled away over the next 9 races. It's kind of bizarre to see, and they don't seem to have any answers yet. But yeah, we could get a big upgrade package in a few races, but as we go into the sort of big overseas stint. But yeah, and actually on top of that, bad pit stop, which is very uncharacteristic. So they didn't really have anything. They didn't have strategy, they didn't have pace, they didn't have a pit stop speed. They were just sort of very uncharacteristic of them today, just not seeming the Red Bull we were used to.
No, I did speculate yesterday maybe with them making such a surprisingly radical change to the car for this season, if maybe they just don't understand it yet. If there's an element of that involved, I don't know. They've put an upgrade on the car somewhere that's not working. They need to find what that is. Had they put that same upgrade on last year's car at the same point, they might have understood that car better and been able to solve it. So I don't know if that's part of it. I've seen some people talking that maybe we're now seeing, I think it was Engine Mode 11 said, are we starting now to see the results of that wind tunnel penalty that they had? Is some of that part of it, and I trust him quite a bit because he used to work at Red Bull, so he knows his F1. Let's put it that way, his technical side. But lots of question marks about what could be causing this. But like you said, the race today, I wouldn't say everything that could go wrong did go wrong, but it's like I said, not the Red Bull we've been used to over the last sort of, 2 seasons really or so, maybe more. But yeah, Sergio Perez P8 today, by the way. Not a lot to say. We've already been over the Russell incidents. Got past Russell lap 11, turn 1 for P7. Took the lead when Verstappen pitted on lap 21. Yes, Perez took the lead. Bless him. Pitted end of lap 22, rejoining P8 just behind Verstappen. Lap 31, that fight with Russell. We've gone over that one. And then pitted for a second stop at the end of lap 35 for mediums. Rejoined in P9, just ahead of Russell. And then lap 38, the other incident with Russell, where there was nearly contact, that late move in the straight line, just on the approach to turn 1, where he sort of come across a bit late, which, again, surprised the stewards didn't at least take a little look at that. But they obviously felt it was just on the line, which is fair enough. You can go up to the line, that's absolutely fine, but don't go over it. But yeah, Perez, dare I say, I don't know if it's because Verstappen's pace wasn't really there or not enough today that it makes Perez look like he's improved. But I do feel like Zandvoort was better. Not amazing, but better. And I feel like better again this weekend, but I'm not sure. It's difficult to read, but certainly there's been a drop-off from Max Verstappen's side with his car, and maybe Perez has picked up a bit, or it's just the way it's worked the last 2 races. I don't know, but I have no idea what's going on at Red Bull, and I'll be honest, from what we read and from what they say, I'm not totally sure they 100% know what it is, but Max says they're working hard, they're trying to fix it, but yeah, what did you make of Perez's race then, Stuart, before we roll on? I've got not much to add, really, otherwise we're going to sit speculating for 3 hours about why they are where they are and not really have an answer.
I actually written in my notes how impressed I was with Perez.
Okay.
I know it's a P8, but he stayed with Verstappen for most of the race. The only reason he kind of dropped off at the end was because Verstappen took his last set of tyres so much later, so he had some pretty fresh tyres by the end. But his pace was not that different to Verstappen's through the race. Yeah, it was a bit marginal on his aggression with Russell, but some good fighting. He seemed to have spirit. Wherever this car is, he seemed to be able to match it in a very similar way to his teammate, which we hadn't seen. We're kind of used to him being like sort of P8, but P8 with a really, really good car. And now he's P8 with this sort of more mediocre car. And I don't know if he's just destined to be P8 no matter what the car is. And maybe if the car becomes as bad as a Sauber, he'll look like an absolute hero. But yeah, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty good from Perez as benchmarked by the performance of the car. And he's not a million miles off Verstappen either on Saturday or Sunday. So I was like, yeah, this is the Perez we're used to seeing. He seemed to actually just have some pace and some go get it. So yeah, obviously not a lot of points, but a decent showing for him, especially when they do need every point they can get right now. They're still 30 points ahead, which they'll be incredibly glad for, considering they easily could have lost the lead this race if McLaren had that one too. And I think I didn't check it myself, but I heard the stat that if the race finished in the qualifying order, they would have lost the lead.
Yeah,
but I'll have to double check that. So having a 30-point margin is probably a blessed relief for them, despite having a very bad weekend by their standards.
Yeah, there was a point in the race as well where they were doing the maths on Sky Comms, and they were sort of talking about, the fastest lap could give them the lead or they could be tied. So it's 18 points, isn't it? The lead.
I might be looking at I might need to refresh. I just hadn't refreshed my F1.com hadn't updated its stats. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, that's still, yeah. And, we got 2 races time. We're going to Singapore, where Red Bull did not have a good race last year at all. But they have a completely different car this year, so,
It's good. The next couple of races are going to be interesting, really interesting. I'm not sure where they are. I did see Purple Zebra just say, where's that gone? Where are you? They made the car more like Mercedes last year, and now Verstappen is saying similar things to Hamilton back then. We need to change this now. So I don't know. There's some talk about asymmetrical braking where they're using it. I can only go off what we've been told by the FIA no teams were using it. It's just they've closed a loophole so teams can't use it, but people will draw their own conclusions, I'm sure. there are people in the F1 fan base who often think they know a lot more than the FIA do on these things, but there you go. Johnny, thank you very much for your super chat, mate. He says, I'm going to try and read this now. Frangoat go to Pinto. That is a hell of a mouthful. We'll come to that shortly. Did everything that Sargeant couldn't. 18th to 12th, dispatching an Aston, both Alpines, a Haas and an RB. Finished just 12 seconds behind Alex and a better fastest lap sorted. Thank you very much, Johnny. I always read the super chats when they come in, but we will get to Frangoat go to Pinto at some point. Thank you very much to Warren M as well for your super chat. No message, but I'm sure I can pick one up in the chat somewhere, Warren, at some point today. But thank you very much for your support. In fact, there you go from Warren. It says, how long has it been since the driver completed every lap in the season? Piastri on target now for most laps in a single season. I'll have a look at that at some point, but that's, a record maybe for Piastri there, which could be quite interesting. But I suppose before we move on to Williams, Stuart, here's a question, or a point really, which I guess a lot of people are going to be asking. I'll let chat give their answer as well. Yesterday, I said in the qualifying watch along, I still think Max will win the drivers. Sat here today, looking at the points gap, I still think, and obvious statement, he's the favourite. He's got the most points. Of course, he's the favourite. I still think he might just get this over the line. But are you less confident now about the Drivers' Championship than you were, let's say, 3 or 4 races ago? Because we were both pretty much like, yeah, he's got it. I can't see Lando beating him. Are you looking now at not just the points gap, but also really more the pecking order, where Red Bull are after these last 2 weekends, how poor they've been and how good McLaren have been? Are you less confident now that he's going to win it, or do you still think it'll be Max all the way?
I think, it's really tricky. I think the next couple of races might give us more indication, whether this was just a really bad weekend for Red Bull or this is where they are now, because I think Mercedes are, weekend to weekend it varies. I think they're sort of about where Red Bull is and can squeeze ahead of Red Bull if they need to. I think it's quite easy not easy, but it's easy to imagine Mercedes finishing ahead of Red Bull sort of regularly in races if they're sort of at this pace. Ferrari have an upgrade package now. They could easily finish ahead of Red Bull regularly if this is the way things are. So we've got, if McLaren get themselves together and sort of keep themselves at the top race after race after race, we've then got 2 other teams before Red Bull. So if that's the kind of gap we're sort of imagining between Norris at the top, assuming winning races, and wherever Verstappen can place himself somewhere in that Ferrari Mercedes sort of sandwich, depending on how good a day he's having. It's much more possible than it was, isn't it? It's suddenly sort of becoming possible on the horizon. That's why, and we're going back a few teams now, I think maybe McLaren will go and have a chat and be like, we need to just, first 2 laps, we just need to lock it down. Don't fight with each other, and then we'll think about it after that. We just need to get ourselves ahead of the pack and break away from DRS zone and just allow us to score as many points as possible. But yeah, I think it's much more possible now than it is. But we'll see over the next couple of races where Red Bull actually are in the pecking order.
Yeah, just a line from the press release just coming from Red Bull, by the way, from Max Verstappen. Says, I've given a lot of feedback on the car, so in the next 2 weeks before Baku, we need to focus on turning things around and fixing some of the issues we've identified over the past few weekends, and said this is just how racing goes sometimes, which is fair. We've seen teams fall away before, haven't we? It's nothing new, but it does feel like this one with Red Bull is a lot more dramatic or sudden than we've seen from teams before. But I did say yesterday, I don't know if I think people agreed largely, Stuart, but I think what makes this look bigger is the improvement from McLaren and Mercedes and some weekends Ferrari. So Red Bull have fallen back, have sort of lost a chunk of their pace and they've fallen back. But with everybody else also improving by a big chunk, that kind of almost doubles that, doesn't it? Makes it look like a bigger fall off, so or a bigger drop off. So I might be wrong there, but that's sort of how I sort of look at things. Yeah, go on, Stuart. Sorry.
Did you see that interesting graphic that kind of popped up? I think it popped up during the qualifying. It was an F1 graphic on the screen that sort of showed how performance had changed from all the teams. It might have been during practice, but it sort of stayed up on a long time on the screen, and Crofty took an age to get to talking about it. But it showed McLaren have gained 0.32 seconds over the benchmark since Bahrain, and Red Bull have lost 0.14 seconds, and they're still considered the second fastest team according to this performance chart. And I spoke to my friends about this, and they're like, I don't understand what this even means. I don't know how they do this or get the data, because every track's very different, and I don't know how they benchmark that performance. But yeah, but essentially this is saying that McLaren have gained about 0.44 seconds, 0.46 seconds over Red Bull in that time. Ferrari over that time apparently dropped 0.4 seconds, but this is before the Italy upgrades. But it was an interesting chart to see. I don't know how accurate it is, because when you're sort of benchmarking performance, you have to kind of like weight it by all the data you're getting from. Not every lap is the same, is it? And not every track is the same. But yeah, it was interesting to see. And we'll see if Red Bull can cling on to dear life to what they've got.
It just felt clean on, doesn't it, by the fingernails? But we'll see what comes in next few. Can I have a moan very, very quickly? There's one every stream. I'm getting it's just such a nothing issue, but it bugs me so much. It's not related necessarily to Red Bull, but F1 do it a lot. Sky do it a lot. Others as well. Talking about how we're flat out now to Abu Dhabi and it's non-stop to Abu Dhabi. It's like, that's not true. There's a month after. There's 4 weeks after Singapore where there's nothing. Then we've got 3 weeks after, I think, Brazil until we get to Las Vegas. So can we stop that, please? It's not flat out. I wish it was. Really pedantic. Does not matter. Let's move on to Williams very, very quickly. Alex Albon, a couple of points on the board. Good drive from him today. Pitted in about 17 for hard tyres. 3.1 second stop, so slowish. Complained on the team radio again, though. Second time this season, they were being too indecisive. That came from the Skycom. So interesting stuff there from Alex Albon. But really good weekend. Not massively surprised, to be honest. I think I thought Williams would be strong coming into this weekend. It is very much one of those Williams tracks. He qualified ninth, didn't he, and finished ninth. So he did. He was the winner of the midfield, as I like to call it. 2 points on the board. Cracking drive. But again, it's just you give Albon a car on a track that it'll perform on, and he will pick up the points if they're there to be picked up. So just what I would say a classic Williams Monza. There you go. That'll do. Certainly from recent years. But yeah, cracking drive from Albon today. Involved in a couple of scraps. I have got his press release here, so I'll quickly, or not his. He doesn't send me his own release. Like, hi Sean, it's Alex. That would be quite cool, though. Says, good race, and I'm happy. I felt like we did a decent job whilst also struggling quite a lot with the tyres, so some struggles with the tyres there. Front left was always a problem throughout, so I had to manage this, and I couldn't really stop the graining, which was always a problem for us. In the end, we did a good job for surviving while relying on Kevin's penalty to get P9. Haas had us beat this weekend on race pace, so we still have some work to do, but with another upgrade to come, hopefully we can get back into this point-scoring rhythm for the remaining races of the season. Good point there, actually. Yes, he did benefit, didn't he, from Magnussen's penalty, but Alex Albon didn't get a penalty, so I'm not going to take that away from him. So I suppose actually then he's won the midfield because of that Magnussen penalty in some ways. In fact, in a lot of ways he's gained the place, but that maybe makes the result even better for Williams then if they feel that Haas were better on race pace and they've beaten them today, penalty or not. Cracking drive from Alex Albon.
Absolutely, yeah, and he made that one stop work. I was actually surprised how many people did do the one stop in the end, but yeah. Yeah, another kind of solid day. No, didn't get involved in too much. He had a little battle with Magnussen on lap 34, where Magnussen overtook him. But yeah, I think he had a great race, and exactly as you say, really, I think he will deliver for you. And I'm also looking forward to next year, when I think the pair of them will deliver and wring the neck of that Williams, whatever it is they get, which I'm assuming is going to be still a midfield kind of car. But yeah, I think the value of Alex Albon cannot be underestimated. He's a great driver, and I think going on to sort of what his sort of complaints in the middle of the race, I think that's probably fair. I feel like as a sort of team structure, kind of at how they operate outside of the races, I think Williams are really starting to get themselves together. They seem to be less of a mess, and they're all working together, and they're developing the car and the team and growing and so on. I don't think they've necessarily got it all together on race day, and I think that's maybe what they need to work on going forward, to have good strategy, being able to develop it on the fly, being able to communicate that to the drivers, because Albon seemed to not know what they wanted from them. When Magnussen overtook him, his sort of complaint was they weren't they seemed satisfied with that, and he was like, "Well, do you want me to just stick behind Magnussen, knowing I'll benefit from the penalty, or do you want me to push and try and get the people further up the road that I think I might be able to get?" And it just seems like they didn't have the answers he needed ready, and I think they just need to be able to have, like, you know, three strategies on the fly. If this happens, if a safety car happens, if we end up behind whoever, I think they just need to be more on the ball with that, and that they're not quite there yet on race day.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. Franco Colapinto, I've not got anything in my notes because I don't really recall seeing a huge amount of him. There was quite a lot going on elsewhere, to be fair, so that's probably why. But I think, and people will tell me I'm wrong, I'm sure, but I actually think for a debut weekend, as he says in his press release, hasn't driven more than 8 laps in that car, and he's done 53 today in some very high temperatures. I think he did a cracking job this weekend. A little bit disappointed after qualifying with that mistake, but as I said yesterday, that's the same mistake that Carlos Sainz, who's vastly more experienced in a much better car, made. So it happens sometimes. We saw a couple of drivers almost make that mistake today, dipping a wheel into the gravel on the exit of the second Lesmo. So it's not I don't think it's a negative that he made that mistake. It just happens, and I think he had a really good first weekend. 12th place. Where was he? 12.8, 12.9, so 13 seconds, 30.8 seconds off Alex Albon come the end of the race. I don't think that's bad at all. He's still on the lead lap, which is impressive. That's, again, not a dig at Logan Sargeant, and he's already moved himself ahead of poor Valtteri Bottas in the Drivers' Championship. He's doing. I think he did all right, and in his race quotes, it says, "Really happy to complete my first Formula 1 race. It's a moment I'll never forget. Race was physically tough, as I'm a bit tired and sore now, but there are plenty of positives to take. I think I did a good job of managing the tyres to make the one-stop work, and the race pace was strong. I'm very happy for the team. It was great to give them a positive result for my first race after all the hard work they've put in to get me up to speed this weekend. Lots of things to work on, but I'm very excited to jump back in the car in 2 weeks to go racing again." So, yeah, what do you think of Colapinto this weekend? I don't think it's not going to be a debut that blows anybody away. You know, it's not points, and it's not a shock podium, but it was never going to be a shock podium. But you know what I mean? I still think that's a really solid first weekend. And if the goal was to be better than Logan Sargeant, Sargeant's best result this year was 11th, and he's already 12th. So I think he did a cracking job. I'm going to have a look at chat in a minute, and they're all going to tell me I'm wrong, or they'll tell me I'm right. I don't know. What did you think, Stuart?
No, I was really impressed. With him. 12th, gained 6 places, highest of anyone. Maybe would have been a little bit higher if he'd had a little bit of better qualifying. But in all honesty, it was one little error, like you say, as a place where a lot of people were making errors at the exit of the Lesmos. So it can happen. It just happened at just the wrong point. If it had happened earlier in Q1, he could have got a second run in and made it work and got through to Q2 probably. So yeah, but made up for it. Kind of got his car back to probably where it should have been. I think they'll be very happy with him. I'm not gonna say vindicated yet Williams' decision, because I think we should just let a couple of races pass to just to double check. He's good, but it's hard to compare him to Behrman's debut. But being in a bit of a more anonymous team, I think he had a very solid weekend and delivered very, very well in that car. So I hope the rest of the season goes well for him. If he's sore now, I think he needs to really train up before we get to Singapore, because that is a brutal race that takes it out of even the most experienced driver. So I hope they've got a program for him to be able to survive through that, to be honest. But yeah, really, really impressed to see him. I wonder where that will place him in future when he's continuing to look for a seat in F1.
Yeah, no, I agree. We can't completely judge him today, can we? If we sit here today and say absolutely the right decision to get rid of Logan Sargeant, and next weekend Colapinto has 6 accidents across the weekend, has to sit out the rest of it because he's damaged the car in practice, and has a shocker in Singapore, then we're probably we're looking a bit silly, aren't we? But no, yeah, definitely. I think for a good first weekend, see how he gets on in Baku. Baku's quite a physical track as well, isn't it? Am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be a tricky few weeks for him, but I think good start. Good start is what we'll say for Colapinto. I'm actually surprised a lot of people in chat agreeing that it was a good start. It was impressive. Obviously still work to do, but I'm happy for him. So we'll move on to Haas. Right, Hulkenberg quickly first. Pushed off at Ascari, or pushed off at Ascari by Ricciardo on the first lap, took to the grass and dropped to P16. Lap 5 went for a move on Tsunoda, locked up and hit Tsunoda. Pitted end of lap 5 for repairs. Incident was noticed and investigated, 10-second time penalty. It was really that first lap incident with Ricciardo that started the decline for the day, if you like, for Hülkenberg, and then obviously the contact with Tsunoda, sloppy. It happens when you go for those dive bombs, but it is a penalty. 10 seconds, in line with what they'd normally do for those. I do think very unfortunate, and I feel a bit for him because of what happened with Ricciardo, which put him in the position to be there with Tsunoda, but that's part of racing. But a shame, actually, because he started really well. He was up in P10. Looked like he might get some points today. Just frustrating for Hülkenberg. But really, with the greatest of respect to Nico Hülkenberg, the big story is Kevin Magnussen. So in my notes, very quickly, lap 18 went for a move on Gasly at the second chicane, locked up, hit Gasly, who cut the corner and got a 10-second time penalty. The problem for Magnussen is that 10-second time penalty also came with 2 penalty points, which means he's got 12 for a 12-month period, and it has been confirmed by the FIA that he has been suspended for the Baku Grand Prix, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. So first point, Stuart, those rules do have teeth. We were questioning this last year, weren't we? Whether they had teeth or not. So they do have teeth. And I'll just read you the decision. They say the driver of Car 20 has accrued 12 penalty points in the past 12 months period of the 2024 FIA Formula 1 World Championship. The super license of the driver of Car 20 is suspended for the next competition of the World Championship. Following this suspension, 12 penalty points will be removed, so he'll be relieved at that one. He can have some fun in the final 7 races again. In accordance with Article 4.2 of the sporting regulations, as the driver of Car 20, that's Kevin Magnussen, has accrued 12 penalty points. The super license of the driver must be suspended for the next competition. Competitors can appeal. I doubt they will, though. Get those points off and let him go racing hard in the second or these final few races. These last 7 races he'll have. Magnussen looked pissed, quite frankly, in the pen afterwards. He felt that the rules weren't consistent. He doesn't think that the incident with Gasly was worth a 10-second penalty and 2 penalty points, as it turned out. He thought that the stewards should let them race. There was no damage to Gasly. There was no damage to Magnussen. It made no difference to either of their races, is what he was saying. He also said that he doesn't understand how Ricciardo, I think he worded it something along the lines of almost shoving Hülkenberg into the wall on lap 1 was only 5 seconds, but that bit of contact with Gasly was 10. He's not convinced that that's fair. That's a conversation we'll get into, but it's a race ban, Stuart. And if forget the Ricciardo one for a second, but if you look at what usually happens with leaving the track and getting an advantage or causing a collision, they have this season been 10-second penalties pretty much across the board. So it is consistent in that regard. But can you understand why he's a bit annoyed and a bit confused why something that Ricciardo did on lap 1 only got 5 seconds and he got 10? Or do you think Ricciardo's wasn't that bad? I'm intrigued.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And I do sympathise massively with that. And I think maybe the error Magnussen is making in that distinction is he is concentrating very much on the outcome. And this is something we've talked about a lot because we've sort of debated a bit whether how much the stewards take into account, like sort of the outcome, whether someone was taken out, whether there was damage, or whether it's just looking at the move in isolation, no matter whether something bad came of it or not. And I think the stewards have said then they're not supposed to look at outcomes. They're just supposed to look at whether the maneuvers were dangerous or not. And I think in this case, it seems to be they're not looking at the outcome because, yes, quite clearly, Ricciardo caused a significant. It caused Hülkenberg's race to be significantly baddened. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but Hülkenberg's race was basically ruined by that one incident, and when Hülkenberg and I can do this, but when Hülkenberg had his accident with Gasly, they both carried on and it was sort of fine. But in reading what the stewards say, they say Ricciardo moved over and didn't leave room, essentially, is how they've worded it.
So not causing a collision.
And essentially to paraphrase what the stewards said, they basically said that Magnussen was not in control when attempting to overtake because he locked up his wheels and sort of bash into Gasly. So I think that's the distinction they're making. I think it's one of those things that will never have 100% of people agreeing one way or the other. But I think that's what they decided made the difference. I can see why Magnussen is annoyed. To be honest, I think he's more annoyed because it's that crucial 2 points that takes him over into a ban.
Yeah.
I think if this had been, his 4th point of the year, I think he would have been like, that's so annoying. But I think it's just another in a series of sort of clumsy accidents he's had. I'm not going to say the stewards are entirely consistent race to race across the season about how they dole out 10-second penalties and 5-second penalties and who's to blame and when they decide. But I can understand the distinction in how they're wording it. I don't necessarily know if I 100% agree, but I understand what they're saying.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and a couple of people made the point as well, Cat on a Segway, great name, and Warren as well, both making a similar point, but how much of the Ricciardo one as well was because it was lap 1, maybe part of it. I'm never really sure with the stewards whether they give leniency for lap 1 or turn 1, or whether that does vary race to race. I might keep an eye on that actually for the next few races, see if there is a bit of a, some tracks you'll get a bit more leniency for the whole first lap, but other ones you might only get it for the first corner. But maybe there's a part of that, or that's a part of it. But I feel for Magnussen, but Purple Zebra has just popped in again and said again what I was going to say. There have been times this year where I've seen Magnussen do things and not get a penalty, and I've thought, ooh, that should probably be a penalty. So swings and roundabouts, maybe. Yeah, swings and roundabouts, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know what else to say really, but it is a ban. My assumption would be Oliver Bearman. We'll get that seat to go back to that question that was asked earlier by I think it was Lyle, wasn't it? Yeah, Bearman, Schwartzman, or Pietro in Baku. I would assume Bearman because he's going to be in that car next year, isn't he? So this is an opportunity to give him a race this year to see how he gets on. A whole race weekend as a race driver with Haas ahead of him actually getting his debut is probably not a bad thing. Is he in that car or Hulkenberg's car? Does it really matter? But you know what I mean. He's in one of the Haas cars next year, so I think it'll be Bearman. But maybe Fittipaldi will get the call. But my guess will be Bearman as of today. What do you think, Stuart? Bearman, Pietro, Vettel come back for a race. Maybe Hakkinen finally come out of retirement.
I think Bearman makes the most sense for 2 reasons. Obviously he's in that car next year, and getting him as much experience as possible makes sense. But also he's already been in a Formula 1 car this year, and he has some experience already. So if they want to maximize their results, next weekend, well, not next race, they might be better off getting someone who's raced most recently anyway, and with some Ferrari experience. So yeah, I think Bearman makes the most sense on both fronts.
Just because I sort of glossed over him a little bit, Hulkenberg in his quote says, poor first lap getting into turn 8. I got a good toe from Daniel Ricciardo, so I took the outside line, but he swept across and didn't really leave me space, so he made contact and that took me off a bit. The engine went into anti-stall as well, so that took a while to sort out and I lost a few more positions. More or less, that was when the race was looking very difficult. Then the incident with Tsunoda, had to come back for a front wing change, plus the penalty as well. Says you lose so much time, so it's game over. Magnussen says, I'm happy with our race, but I'm disappointed with the penalty. I made slight contact with Gasly at turn 4, and we both missed the corner, but there was no damage in either car. It had no consequence, plus we were racing. I'm happy with today's points. The balance of performance in the car, our strategy, we can take that away. So there are positives for Haas, but I think it's with that penalty, it's a point dropped, I suppose, isn't it? If Magnussen, he did get 1 point, but it probably would have been 2, or it would have been 2 because he was 9th, and Hulkenberg, a case of what could have been, I guess. That's the point scorers then. Just before we get on to the rest of the field, which will be Aston Martin, RB, Alpine, and Sauber in that order. Sauber again, last, bless them. I keep saying bless them today, that's how I'm feeling. But yes, please do leave a like on the stream, by the way. 550 of you here, 135 likes. Please do drop a like, that'd be really appreciated. If we get over 200, that would be amazing. Helps in the algorithm massively. And please do subscribe as well if you are new. If you missed the news yesterday, the channel is now part of planetf1.com and the Planet Sport Network, and we've got a lot of plans for the next days, weeks, months and years, so really excited for that. So please do subscribe if you want to join us for that journey. Hopefully going to be a cracking new chapter and a next chapter for the channel. So thank you once again for all your support and your lovely messages about that announcement on Friday. I can't believe that was 2 days ago. Time does fly, doesn't it? It's an age thing. I'm sure it is. Anyway. Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, P11 today, a 10th, or nearly 2/10 off Magnussen. So we needed 2/10 on that final lap. And maybe he'd have just nicked it with Magnussen's penalty, but no, 11th place for Alonso. That's where he started as well. Lance Stroll was down in 19th place. Curiously, Lance Stroll, I've got nothing in my notes, you can tell straight away, but curiously, Lance Stroll came in on the last couple of laps to put on some softs to go for fastest lap, and fell short by 8/10. Is that 1:22.2, 1:21.4? No, it's more than that, Sean. No, it is 8/10 of a second. So not too far off for Lance Stroll on fastest lap there, but I'm not quite sure why he went for fastest lap from, I think it was about like 15th or 16th or something like that. And then he's not going to get a point, is he? But, you know, it's something, isn't it? It's something to put in a box. I got a fastest lap. So maybe there's a part of that. I don't know. But I'm just going to go straight to the press release. If you are new, by the way, to the channel, this is basically how it goes when we get to the rest, because we've been focusing so much on everybody else that we've not got massive notes. But in their sound bites, as they call them, Alonso says it was a difficult race today, maximise the pace the best we could. I was able to push the car to its limits, so I'm happy in that regard, but we did struggle with the relative pace of the car on track. We were in the points at the start of the race and were able to undercut Albon, thinking all teams would execute a two-stop race. It wasn't enough at the end to recover from that extra pit stop. We were only 0.2 behind Magnussen and a second behind Albon, so it was disappointing not to score any points today. We keep pushing. And Lance Stroll says today's result was more or less what we expected. Oh, Lance, that's depressing, mate. We haven't had the pace to challenge all weekend. We knew there wasn't going to be much we could do from P17. Went into the race open to a 1 or 2 stop strategy, but elected to stop twice when we saw the levels of tyre degradation. We then stopped for a third time at the end to try and take fastest lap. We know we're missing the performance we need, and the focus remains on trying to bring that to the car. I'm looking forward to your comprehensive notes, Stuart, on Aston Martin.
Honestly, when I was putting my notes together for this thing we're doing now, Aston Martin have just got 3 question marks next to them. I don't think I really saw them. I saw a couple of pit stops, but that was kind of it, wasn't it? They were just fairly anonymous, tootling along. They're a little bit neutered at the moment, aren't they, Aston Martin? They're not having a great second half of the season. They weren't having a brilliant first half of the season, but I think they're just kind of seeing the races out now. It's clear this team has big ambitions and they're building up. They get, great new HQ. They're bringing people in. They're investing, and this could be something great, and maybe a championship challenger at some point. But this season, not really going their way, and it's a bit of a shame as well. Lance Stroll got the 6th fastest lap. But if he had got fastest lap, he would have taken a vital point away from Norris, who he's clearly in a championship battle with. So nearly, but not today.
Jonty says, note on Aston Martin, safety car handles crashes pretty well. There you go. Sturdy car.
Most exciting part of their weekend.
Absolutely. And I did see one other and I can't spot it now. Nick says Aston falling like a stone. Also, I will say, keep an eye on the news this week. Crofty was hinting at it in practice that we might hear some news about Adrian Newey's destination for next year, and people seem to think that is pretty much nailed on as Aston Martin. So it would make sense. It would make sense. They've got big ambitions. They, like you say, they want to go for championships in the future, Stuart. But also, Adrian Newey, a lot of talk. They didn't really want to leave the country. Wanted to stay. If he was going to work, he wanted to stay in the UK. Silverstone, it makes sense. So I'm not surprised if that happens. But
haven't they got a little message on the Halo that's like, I don't know what date it was. It was 2nd of September. Like, get ready to be vanquished or something. Maybe it'll all be part of this package, because Adrian Newey does have that relationship with Aston Martin in sort of, didn't he work with some of their hypercars or something when they were with Red Bull? So maybe he'll be doing both. Maybe he'll be making them a new hypercar and working on their F1 team.
That's a good point, actually, isn't it? That might take some of the excitement out of the announcement for some people if they turn around and say he's coming to Aston Martin, but he's going to be on the road car or hypercar side of things. Fernando will be punching the desk. For God's sake, so close. But yeah, no. And one thing I it's difficult because I feel like nowadays with social media, oh, here goes Grandad, get the Hovis music out again. But I feel with social media, a lot of the excitement gets taken out of these announcements because we all find out basically from sources and all that a week before or several months before it happens, and then it happens and you go, oh, Okay. Like the Kimi Antonelli thing, I really wanted to get hyped up about that, but I was like, yeah, but I mean, we knew. We've known for a long time. So that's one thing I don't enjoy. It's the same with, you won't care about this, Stuart, but it's the same with football transfers. When people say, oh, this person, deal done, and then, 6 weeks later it finally gets over the line and you kind of go, all right, okay, cool. It's a shame, but yeah.
Well, that's why
those big breaking news moments, I guess.
Well, the Hamilton to Ferrari, what a day that was.
Yeah,
Rumours in the morning, confirmed in the afternoon. Like, perfect. What an exciting day we had.
That's what we want. Let's more of that, please. More of that, please. RB, Yuki Tsunoda hit by Hulkenberg at turn 1, as we've already talked about in lap 5, retired at the end of lap 7 due to damage. So not really much to add for Yuki there. I'll just double check actually that it was. I did put a question mark next to damage. I assume it was for damage, but I just want to make sure that he said that. Unfortunately, we had to retire the car as we got some damage on the floor. Felt it straight away and tried to continue, but the car was sliding around and I simply wasn't able to drive it. So that's why Yuki. So not really anything to add to Yuki's race, unfortunately. Not his fault. It is part of racing, but it's frustrating. But yeah, nothing for him today beyond lap 7, unfortunately. Daniel Ricciardo, we've talked about a squeeze on Hulkenberg. We'll not get back into that now. He did put the Haas on the grass. There was contact according to Nico Hulkenberg there. Noted and investigated. 5-second time penalty. Also, at lap 10 deep at turn 1 and cut the chicane. Had a slow first stop at 8.4 seconds and was investigated for failing to serve his penalty correctly, which was a bizarre situation in some ways. The car pulled in to serve its penalty and the mechanic, front left, as you look at it on the front wing, kind of grabbed it to steady the car and then went, no. And as soon as that happens, that's it. You've touched the car. Even if you've done nothing to the car, you've still touched the car. That's not going to be serving it correctly. You're going to get a penalty again, to then end up with a 10-second time penalty. And that officially, I think, is the most notes have written for RB in about what feels like 15 years. Ultimately, says Daniel Ricciardo, we weren't quick enough today, even with those penalties, or even without the penalty, sorry. We tried and I was enjoying the wheels we were racing at the start, but I made contact with Nico in turn 8. Spoke to him after the race. I thought we had the space, but felt the contact, so I didn't give him enough room. Apologised to Hulkenberg, so there we go. It is tough as you race hard, but the smallest margins make a difference. The car felt okay afterwards. We pushed as hard as we could with what we had. I was trying to get the maximum out of the car from Friday afternoon to today. Personally, I feel a lot better this weekend, and we were close to scoring points. So, yeah, not a scruffy race for Ricciardo. Shame that the mechanic made that what seemingly looked like a tiny mistake, but turned into a big mistake because it's another penalty and another 5 seconds, I guess, to take it's 10 seconds. I did wonder, though, and this is maybe something the stewards would have frowned upon quite a bit, and he might have gotten in a lot of trouble for this, but I do wonder after the mechanics touch the car, whether you just say, go, 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 and get on with the pit stop, and then just take the 10 seconds later so you're not losing any more time. But I have a feeling the FIA might look at that quite badly, and you might get a bit of a proper ticking off for that, maybe further penalties, maybe big fines, I don't know, but I've not read the regulations on that, but I did wonder. It was just a thought, because they've lost that 5-second penalty they didn't actually technically serve, and then another 10 seconds on top of that, so I can't imagine that would go down well. But yeah, RB, pace-wise, not great, not bad. 13th for Ricciardo today, about where I'd have expected coming into the weekend. Shame for Tsunoda, but I do feel like I'm starting to believe what people said to me a few weeks ago, that Ricciardo seems to be starting to sort of get to grips with things a bit, but not spectacular, but definitely better than, say, earlier in the season.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's a subtle thing, isn't it? But yeah, he does seem to be more himself. I don't think he's making spectacular strides, but but again, a bit of a scruffy start to the race and kind of put him on the back foot with 15 seconds worth of penalties, which, and I know you can't do this, but he was 12 seconds behind Colapinto, so maybe one place in the race, still no points, but the way things pan out, that's not necessarily how it would have finished. I'm a bit worried that RB are they're worse off than they were in the first half of the season. I'm a bit worried they're sort of going to be in a permanent out of the point situation for the rest of the season. They're going to be fighting for maybe a couple of scraps every now and again, but they were definitely more consistent earlier on. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes. But it's I think other teams have moved forward around them a little bit.
Do you know what's weird? hearing you say out of the points, my mind went to the quiz that you did. That was your version of pointless, wasn't it?
Yes,
Where's
it
that
was.
come from? It's like, yes, out of the points. Quick, get an answer, sure. We ain't got time. Yeah. We'll see what RB do, but they did for a bit. They've gone backwards. They sort of moved forward, didn't they? Now they feel like they've gone backwards a little bit, but others have improved. I mean, Alpine, as we're coming on to now, have been a big improvement compared to where they were, so maybe that's part of it. But Gasly today, possible issues with the rear end was reported, but seemed okay. Pitted for new tyres, ended lap 10, then hit by Magnus at second chicane, been over that one. Okay to keep going, then locked up at the second chicane and went wide whilst fighting with Ricciardo. Kept his position by cutting the corner, so gave that back to Ricciardo just to be on the safe side. Esteban Ocon started 15th, finished 14th. Well, I'll tell you what, the summary of Alpine's race, based on my notes, apart from what I just said about Gasly started 14th, finished 15th. Ocon started 15th, finished 14th. They swapped places. Sorry, Alpine. That's basically it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I got. Your summary, the fight with Ricciardo, swapping places. I didn't mention this when we were talking about Colapinto, but Colapinto as only visible on the live feed overtake was on Gasly.
Okay.
On lap 30, he took P15 from him at turn 1. So we can put that in with Gasly's race. Gasly lost the point to Colapinto on lap 30. Otherwise, yeah, they just had a bit of an Alpine race, didn't they? Not this kind of new Alpine, just kind of like mid Alpine, 14th, 15th. Not very exciting weekend for Alpine, was it really?
No, apart from the fact they had to come out and put a statement out saying they haven't offered Nico Rosberg a stake in the team.
And why would you? That man's a menace.
What a weird situation, though. Oliver Oakes, looking back at the weekend, says, we knew coming to this weekend it would be tough for us to repeat the performance of previous races, fighting in the points, particularly on this specific configuration of circuit. So they were expecting Alpine, so maybe not a surprise for them. And last, but I'm going to say not least, but I feel like we always do this now. Bless them all. Sauber, Valtteri Bottas started 19th, to be fair, and did finish 16th. So it's an improvement. Yes, Stroll pitted late. Yes, Hulkenberg had a chaotic race. And yes, Tsunoda retired. But, mini victories and all that, I suppose. And Zhou Guanyu started 20th, finished 18th. In the press release, Bottas says, it has been a pretty clean, uneventful race for us. I went for a one stop, starting with the hard compound, and as we tried something different and hoped to get lucky with the time of a potential safety car. He did run long actually, and pitted on lap 34. I've got here the end of lap 34, so technically 35. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out for us, but I think it was good to give it a try. Looking back at how the race unfolded, I wouldn't have done anything differently. We gained a few positions on track, getting to P16 on merit, but that was really the most we could do. And then talks about haven't made huge progress in terms of pace. Weekend started well, really keeping up the momentum, or couldn't really keep the momentum or improve much. And Zhou Guanyu says our pace today wasn't strong enough to be fighting close to the points. Points?
Yep.
All right, Zhou. Calm down. Especially in a smooth race without any interruptions or big shocks. Pace was clearly not an improvement. While our pace was clearly an improvement over last weekend in Zandvoort, we are on the back foot in terms of performance compared to our direct competitors. Some improvements on single lap pace. Clearly we need to find the car's sweet spot and execute a flawless weekend to get the best results. Then says, rather than relying on luck, our focus as a team is on putting our heads down and continue to work hard to find those crucial few tenths of a second that will bring us closer to the top 10. Zhou's race, what can I say about Zhou's race? Like I said, finished 18th, 9.1 behind Hulkenberg, which doesn't sound horrific until you remember the race that Hulkenberg had, and then maybe that is quite a big gap. And ended at 12, 13 seconds behind his teammate in the end. So I would say on Zhou, better weekend than Zandvoort. Certainly on race day, but I'm trying. Zhou gained 2 positions, Bottas gained 3. There we go. Pit stops, it was 1 stop for Bottas and 1 for Zhou. So did try the 1 stopper, I guess, but didn't work in the end. What you got, Stuart, on Sauber, other than they were there?
Yeah, well, they basically did reverse strategies of each other. Both doing a long hard and a shorter medium, but just in a different order. So nice they're trying things out. There's not a lot to say about them in this race alone, and I do get the feeling that Sauber are not really that focused on 2024 anymore. I'm sure they were at some point, but if they can just keep learning from whatever they're doing in the race, trying strategies, running, I don't know. You've got to hope that Audi behind the scenes are building something impressive and working on something or other, because F1 made such a big, not just F1 itself, but all the media around F1 have got such a big deal about Audi coming in here. And if they turn up with the team in this state, it's going to really deflate a lot of people's balloons, isn't it? But yeah, I think I think this season is a bit of a write-off for them, and they're just treating it that way. And maybe they're just trying to gain information. They don't seem that focused on moving forward, from the impression I get, and we just don't see them during a race. So it's kind of hard to keep tabs on them, isn't it? And
yeah.
And again, I have question marks by their name because they're just entirely anonymous during the races. So it's a shame, because we don't want them to be this way. And they've got this great livery that you can see from a mile away. You're never going to mix it up with another car, but you never see them somehow. They are entirely invisible, despite being the most garish car on the entire grid.
They're always more than a mile away. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, just on Alpine, sorry, not a totally uneventful weekend, of course, for Alpine. They had the protest, didn't they, from the engine staff in the grandstands and the banner and all of that. So not totally uneventful, but on track, yeah, not much. But anyway, that was that. Just the point I wanted to make. Driver of the day. Pop your driver of the day in the chat, everybody. One surname, and I will come through and read a few in just a moment. Don't forget to drop a like as well, by the way. We're 40 away from 200, so let's see if we can do that while we're talking about driver of the day. That'd be fantastic. So please do drop a like, get your driver of the day in the chat, and also don't forget to subscribe if you're new, for lots of content coming up over the next few days, weeks, months, and it's lovely to say this part, years. It's been a while since I've confidently said that. Anyway, driver of the day, Stuart, who have you gone for? I'll tell you right now, before you give yours. I'll go first for once. Leclerc, but I'll give you a second to pick yourself up off the floor from that shocking news.
Just to offer a counterpoint, I'm going to go for Piastri, just because I was very impressed how he asserted himself on that first lap. And then essentially, in a race where if everyone had done two stops and Ferrari hadn't pulled off a masterstroke, kind of just walked away with it. Was the fastest car, I would say, today, and looked high and confident. And I'm fully aware Leclerc is really the driver of the day, but I did want to make a stake for Piastri and the race he did today, and both psychologically and physically in the driving skill. Could have phrased that better. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah, that's all that matters, is I know.
Thanks.
No, yeah. I think Piastri gets a nod. Sainz maybe not. I think there's some really good performances out there, but I think Leclerc for me has got to get it, and I think you're right to give Piastri a nod. So, John says, have they weighed Leclerc's tyres yet? Don't you dare!
Well, yeah,
don't you dare. So, what are you guys saying? So, Bam says Leclerc. Livo says Leclerc. Extreme BHP says Charles. AJ's gone with Piastri or Leclerc. Nick says Leclerc. Yinka says Leclerc, but also Piastri. Hanny says has to be Leclerc. Daniel Philpott goes with Tarso Marquez. That's the name. MC Movie says Piastri. Rossi says Leclerc. Warren's gone with Leclerc. Easy. Purple Zebra's gone with Leclerc. Wing Racer goes with Hulkenberg, driver of the day. Sighted Canvas says Logie Sarge. Fair enough. Cornelius says Charles hands down. George Mr. Saturday, Voucher Mr. Friday says Daniel Yu. CPB says Sainz. Pascal, our resident Sauber fan, is here. Good afternoon, Pascal. Says reasonably happy with Sauber. A better weekend than Zandvoort, all things considered. Happy for you, Sean, regarding your channel. That really is exciting news. Congratulations. Thank you very much, Pascal, for your support, and thank you for those nice words at the end there. And I'm sorry, Sauber, are where they are, but I like your positivity. A better weekend than Zandvoort, so good to hear from you. Is it Slicks says Leclerc by miles. Cat on the Segway says Leclerc. Ricardo Rosset says C64 with another word in the middle there. K-Mag, I missed that one. Where have you go? K-Mag was my driver of the day because of what he was up against, says Peda. Colapinto for Johnny. I wouldn't put Colapinto as the driver of the day, but I think he gets a special mention today just for having a good debut. Warren says Bert Mylander. Latox says Leclerc. Abhishek says Leclerc by miles. Illogical says King Charles. Piastri is another solid choice as KMS boss. Gaston Mazzacane is another name that's cropped up there from Daniel Philpott. Stop it. A few more then. Unhinged Gamer says Oscar. Gabriel Bortoletto says CPB. Good point. Yes. Did you see the F2, Stuart?
I only managed to see the highlights, but yeah, that was very impressive.
Last to first. Yes, he got the safety car, didn't he? Bloody hell.
Made it work, though. Made it work.
Absolutely. You've got to be. I'm not going to say it. I'm not doing the line. Josh says Albon. Obviously, Stoffel's in there. Thank you very much, Unhinged Gaming. Vesk says it's an easy show. And honorable mention goes Colapinto. One more. Bottas for being 22nd in a 20-car championship, says Wing Racer. Fair enough. If you've got any questions as well, please do pop them in chat. We'll answer a few just for a few minutes before we wrap up for the evening. Took a little while to get through everybody there, but I think there was, apart from maybe the last sort of 2 or 3 teams, was sort of something for everybody, really, wasn't there, Stuart, in the notes, I think? Quite a lot to talk about, particularly at the front, so nice for a change. But are you looking forward to Baku and Singapore?
Yeah, Baku's normally throws up some interesting races. There's a couple of duds, but it's fast and tight, and people make mistakes, and we see a lot of battles through the first corners. Almost certainly a safety car, which we haven't seen a lot of for a while, and that's probably why he crashed, because he's a bit rusty. Hasn't driven in a while. So yeah, looking forward to Baku, and I do look forward to Singapore. It can be a bit of a slog, but I quite like the sort of marathon-esque. Pushing 2 hours.
Yeah.
Everyone getting a bit exhausted by the end of it, kind of thing of it. It's an interesting kind of strategic race, and very interested to see Red Bull feature in that.
Hanny says, I'll just reiterate a fun fact I stated earlier. Norris last weekend and Leclerc this weekend had gyro cameras on their cars. Coincidentally, they went on to win the race as a result. Race interference.
Mm-hmm.
Something going on there, not having it. That's a good stat. No, that's a good point. Yeah. Daniel Philpott and Pedder would like to know who's getting the last Audi seat. Pedder saying Bottas, Joe, Magnussen, Colapinto, or someone else. I think coming into the weekend, Bottas was favourite, but I saw some reports or quotes or something like that earlier from Mattia Binotto, who was saying Mick Schumacher's on what is apparently quite a long shortlist. For that seat as well. So I think Bottas or Mick Schumacher could be the favourites on that one. K-Mag's an interesting shout. I've not really thought about it. Experience, but I'm not sure they put him alongside Hulkenberg again, as Haas had. They might do, but I'll go. Do you know what? I'll go Mick Schumacher for an all-German lineup, even though I think it will probably be Bottas.
I think that'd be really interesting. I still think Mick Schumacher deserves a second shot at things. And then if he's still a bit rubbish, then we'll see. But I think seeing that team through to Audi and getting a chance at that, I think would be interesting. If Colapinto continues to do well, it'd be nice to see that he could get himself a seat for all his efforts. But that seems like a bit of a longer shout to me. Yeah. I don't know if Bottas is going to get that seat though. I know he was sort of favourite, but I don't know if they want to be like, let's change things up. This is the opportunity to do it. So we'll see. I'm sure it's a highly favoured. I mean, I was gonna be sarcastic there and say I think it's a highly favoured seat, but it is becoming Audi. So it's one of those weird things where you take the poison in 2025 in order to. I'm making up a metaphor here, but to get the nectar in 2026. You know what I mean? Like grind through next year. Yeah, you sort of you have to take the rough next year to get to 2026 and maybe have a surprise Audi incredible year, depending on how good they are at making this new engine and stuff. Yeah, interesting seat. I think there's plenty. I like your Mick Schumacher.
I think there's a point to be made as well. Actually, just sort of picking apart your metaphor there. There's a point as well to be made for, does Bottas want to do another year of this before the Audi thing? He might go off and do something else, do some rallying or something for a year or two, and then maybe come back in the future if something opens up. But I've just seen in chat, Josh has just said Where's Josh? I've lost him now. Sorry, Josh. Says it's mental that Pierre is so overlooked for that Sauber seat. But also, you've got Pierre is a shout because he's a Sauber junior. Obviously, the decision will be Audi's and not necessarily Sauber's, but he is a Sauber junior. But also, you've got Zane Maloney, who's done pretty well this year in F2. So maybe could he be in there? But I think it feels like they seem to want to go with some sort of experience, whether that's someone who's been in F1 for a long time or someone who's been in F1 before. But there, Hulkenberg's experience, you could stick a Pierre or a Maloney in there, but obviously they're Sauber juniors and not Audi juniors, so maybe that'll change things. But yes, we've covered Haas KL74. Just to confirm, to answer your other question, you were next on my list actually. Kevin Magnussen has got a race ban. He will miss Baku, 12 penalty points in a 12-month period on his super license. That's been suspended, so he'll be back for Singapore. No word officially on who'll replace him, but me and Stuart think Oliver Behrman makes the most sense, so it'll probably be Behrman. But usually when me and Stuart makes predictions, we're pretty far off, so maybe it'll be Ocon or something. I don't know. They'll take Ocon out of the Alpine contract and not bother bringing Magnussen back. I don't know. There you go. So yeah, that's the latest there. We'll see what happens in the coming days. I'm sure we'll hear something pretty quickly because I'll need to make an announcement. It's only a week off, isn't there? Or 2 weeks ready before Baku. So yeah, not too long.
I will say very briefly, obviously we don't want to see someone getting race bans for being a danger, but I am quite glad we get to see that it is a possibility.
Yeah,
because we did talk around the fact that we didn't think the stewards had the guts to actually go through with the full race ban, and every time someone got close to it, they seem to be avoiding giving points. So I'm glad to see that there is a danger of getting a race ban if you race too recklessly, and it's not just a threat.
Yeah, there was a point, was it early this year or early last year, where Gasly was really on the brink, and then sort of the rules, if you like, changed over the winter where they said we're going to stop giving penalty points for certain things, and we thought, oh, is this them just trying to avoid suspending or doing a race ban or whatever? And we wondered, didn't we? Are they going to bottle this? Is this going to change? Will it be a case of, yeah, you've got 12 points, but actually some of those points weren't for big issues, so we'll let you off? So I agree. I don't want to see drivers getting booted out of races for these sorts of things, but it's nice to see those rules have got teeth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Ayu Komatsu has confirmed they are not appealing it, according to Peda. Again, that's not a surprise to me, though. Like I said, I sort of touched on it earlier. I think if I were in Komatsu's place, yes, Magnussen's leaving at the end of the year, but I think surely there's more benefit to Haas potentially giving, let's say, Behrman a full race weekend with the team and getting all those points wiped off Magnussen's license for the rest of the year. Because that's going to give them options, isn't it? Not that they're going to tell Magnussen to go crashing into people, but he could be a bit more aggressive and not worry about those race bans. Yes, I said more aggressive for Magnussen, and that's a terrifying thought at times. But it's going to be a close fight in there with Williams and the others, RB as well. So maybe getting those points off the license might be a good thing for Haas. I'm not surprised they're not appealing it. Plus, generally, more often than not, when you appeal to the FIA, it's thanks but no thanks, isn't it? You generally stuck with what you've got. So yeah, and I agree with Ryan Ryan says there's no point in the rule if they don't actually stick to it. He's done a few wild moves in the last 12 months, so it's justified. Yeah, that's what we're saying. There's no point having the rule if they don't stick to it, but it is good to see they have got the bottle to actually suspend. I apparently I need to stop saying ban. It's a suspension, not a ban. Sorry, sure. Peda. Sorry.
It's a good thing that Behrman isn't in the title fight in F2, really, or so that won't ruin his momentum or anything if he gets pulled out for a race.
That's a good point as well, yeah.
I can't remember. F2 normally go to Baku, so I'm assuming they are this time.
Oh, well, that noise was. I'm so sorry. I'm hungry. If you heard my stomach there, that was really loud. I'm so sorry. I don't think this is my Cocoa Pops this morning. Yes, I'm 38. Does Haas need to get confirmation for Ferrari to use Behrman, says Evan? Good question, actually. Yeah, they will need to get permission from Ferrari, but I think given that the deal's done, he's in the Haas next year, and the fact that, like Stuart says, there's not really an F2 title to fight for, I can't see them saying no. Obviously, and we'll touch wood, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but if anything were to happen to Sainz or Leclerc, bearing in mind Leclerc does still have his appendix, and something happens to Sainz or Leclerc, then maybe that changes. But I think they'll be fine with that one. John says, speaking of speed of theories, speaking of what on earth? Speaking of feeder series, help! Did you watch the F3 finale? I can't do it. OMFG. I did, John T. Mental. Did you see it, Stuart? The F3 final.
I didn't. I should go watch that then, should I?
Oh yeah, no more spoilers then. Definitely go watch it. It is mad from start right until the finish. That's all I'll say.
Okay, I will go watch that.
Definitely go watch that one. Apparently they need permission from the Pope, says Cited Canvas. So there you go. What about Logie Bear? He could sub for K-Mag, says Nick Surface. It's not. I was gonna sort of make a joke around it, but that's not an awful idea. People will go, "What are you talking about, Sean?" But actually, he's been racing this year, so if they want somebody who could just hop in with some experience in Formula One of this year's cars and things, yes, it's a different team, but maybe they could. I'll be honest, I'd be very, very surprised, but I don't think it's perhaps as nuts as I thought it sounds when I first read it.
I think
Stuart thinks it's crackers.
Is it? So I checked. So Fittipaldi and Behrman are Haas's reserve drivers for this year. But they could be like, yeah, this person's got a lot more experience and is ready to hop in, possibly. But I wonder what the clauses are around swerving their actual official reserve drivers to pull someone else in.
Why have reserve drivers if you then go and pick up Logan Sargeant?
Well, yeah, quite. Interesting. But probably not. I feel like it's got to be Behrman, isn't it?
Arian Gomez says, could Behrman finish the year in Haas? I'm going to say he could, absolutely. But I'd be very surprised because I think, without knowing the ins and outs of Gene Haas's finance and the team finances, I think they've probably paid enough out recently without them having to buy Magnussen out his contract. So I think they'll honour Magnussen's contract. They do love him as well, don't they? They brought him back after that time away. He was a great servant to them in his first stint there. They seem to have a really good relationship, actually. So I don't think they replace Magnussen permanently with Behrman before the end of this season. But I mean, to be really pedantic, they could, but I don't think they'd do that. I think Magnussen will see out the year. It's expensive to buy people out of contracts, but also he's been good for them. I know there've been some moments at times, expensive collisions and stuff, but I think overall Magnussen and Haas have worked really well together, and so I'd be surprised if they boot him out the door early. But I'm going with Behrman for the next race. Let's have, what time are we at? Let's have one or two more. We'll be relatively quick fire, and then we will call it a day there. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I might go for, but I don't think it's likely. Adam Osborne says, do you think Perez can get back on the podium this year if Red Bull get quicker? When I first read that, Adam, my immediate response to that was they need to get Verstappen there first. But then he was there in Zandvoort, wasn't he? So that's maybe a little bit much there. But if the car improves, I think he could get back on the podium. But I think that will be a struggle for him between now and the end of the season. I think Verstappen will still pick up podiums. Do you know, there might even be an argument to be made that Verstappen may struggle to win another race this year. But that's quite a reactionary comment based on what's happened today. In Zandvoort, yes, he was a long way off Lando Norris, but he was second, and if anything had happened to Norris, a mechanical problem, a crash or anything, then he wins the race. So he can still win races, but I've seen some people talking in the comments and on social media, is this it for Verstappen this year? But things happen in Formula One and could change very quickly, as we've seen this season. So I wouldn't totally write Perez out of podiums or Verstappen out of winning races, but I think it'll be tough for Checo to be back in the top three, because you've got to think, even if the Red Bull car improves and they're fighting for wins again, you've still got McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes in that mix. There's 8 drivers, including Perez there. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And as I said earlier, P8 is where he belongs, no matter how good the car is. P8 is where he's gonna finish in the race. So unless it's a big turnaround, it seems unlikely. As you were talking then, I was kind of thinking about how getting to the point where we're starting to write Red Bull off and being like, are they going to get any wins? Any more wins? Are they going to struggle for podiums the rest of the year? And it's so interesting how quickly we reestablish the status quo and assume that's what it's going to be like, considering in this season the status quo has changed dramatically quite a lot over the things. So things could, one strong upgrade in the coming races could turn things around again. McLaren could lose their way a little bit. Things could turn around again. It seems less likely, but I don't think we can assume the way things are now are the way they're going to be for the next 9 races.
Yinka says, can't remember the last time Perez was on the podium. I can answer that for you. It was China for Perez. It was, which was the 5th race of the season, which, to put that into even more context, was the 21st of April. That's the last time Sergio Perez stood on the podium. That's not surprised me, but 4th in Miami. So his last top 4 finish was Miami. And the closest come otherwise is Zandvoort last week in 6th. So, Stuart sort of joking there about P8 being his place. 8th in Imola, 8th in Spain, 7th in Austria, 8th in the Austria Sprint, 7th in Hungary, 7th in Belgium, 8th in Italy. So he is sort of around sort of 6th, 7th, 8th place, isn't he? So I think it'll be tough for Perez to get a podium unless Red Bull suddenly put an upgrade on that makes their car a rocket ship again. But we've got a couple of tracks that should suit Perez coming up, though. He won in Singapore a couple of years ago, didn't he, I think? And Baku, when he was at Force India, Racing Point, whatever they were called at the time, was able to get podiums there. Got a couple there. It was one of his tracks he enjoyed. So he could surprise us in a couple of weeks' time, but we'll see. His last win was Baku 2023, according to Nick.
Now's his time to shine.
There you go. He needs to do it now.
The question is, will George Russell overtake him in the drivers? He's 21 points behind him. So
he is, yeah.
Likely, if things stay this way.
I think I predicted a while ago. I thought Perez would be 8th in the standings come the end of the season. So he's not under any threat from
been disqualified.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but no threat from Alonso, I don't think. Although 8 drivers have hit over 100 points this season. Is that unusual? That feels unusual. Sean's Googling quickly.
It's a good yeah.
What was it last year? Because it wasn't as competitive, obviously, but oh no, not really. George Russell last year in Red Bull Domination got 175, and Aussie P was only 3 off 100. So no, it's not unusual. It just looked it there when I was looking at the tables on good old Wikipedia. But yeah, no, it's not all that unusual. Or at least last year it was a similar story. So there we go. Answers that question. One more then, and then we will call it a day. Actually, you know what? I know we've sort of already answered this because we talked about it earlier, but I think this is a good way to end the stream. Antonio says, sorry if this has been asked, just joined, but was it a bad McLaren strategy call or a good one for Ferrari that I assume that you're saying, Antonio, is that won the race? We did sort of agree earlier, didn't we, Stuart, that we think that there is an element of McLaren losing this race. We preferred to go with the Ferrari strategy won it today, and it's a win that they took rather than McLaren threw away, because we were going with a positive, but I think it's a mix of both, isn't it? But Ferrari definitely bang on with strategy today. Huge credit. We don't say that enough on strategy, so let's do it. And great drive from Leclerc, so I'm going with the positive.
Yeah, similarly, I don't think McLaren would ever have made this strategy call from the lead. They would have stuck with what made the most sense at the time. And probably on paper still makes the most sense of taking that 2-stop and using the tyres as they calculated. I think what happened was Ferrari got themselves into a position where they had track position and they thought, you know what, let's try it. I think we can make this work. And I think that's only a decision you can make when your sort of opportunity hands you an option. I don't think McLaren would have looked at the race ahead of time and said, let's go for the 1-stop, because I think they would have felt incredibly vulnerable doing that. It would have felt like a bad idea. So yeah, I think Ferrari, great strategy from Ferrari, great on the fly re-strategizing. And amazingly, we didn't hear any calls of like, we've gone to plan F or whatever. They just very plainly stuck their heads down and got on with just finishing the race. So yeah, very, very impressive from Ferrari.
Yeah, nothing more to add. Very happy, of course, obviously. All the cited canvas says Ferrari won by accident while they were checking. True story. There you go. Yeah, we'll leave it there then, Stuart. Thank you so much for your company this afternoon or this evening or whatever you want to call it. Pre-evening, we'll go with that again. It was a good race. I enjoyed that better than Zandvoort. Zandvoort was a bit disappointing, but we've got a couple of races that could be quite chaotic coming up as well. So throw in a close field, a bit of chaos. It could be a lot of fun. So looking forward to Baku and Singapore.
Yes, me too. Back to back as well. So yeah, exciting month ahead. Yes,
and then a whole autumn break for gestures randomly at the room.
Yeah, for some reason.
Because the summer break wasn't enough. But yeah, thank you very much, Stuart. Pleasure as always, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. I hope you get better soon as well.
Thank you. I made it. I survived. My voice intact. I didn't cough into the microphone by accident. Yeah, thanks for having me again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, talk to you soon, Stuart. Thank you very much again. Bye. Thank you to Stuart and, of course, you guys as well for tuning in. I am going to go to the end screen. The channel is now officially part of Planet Sport and planetf1.com, but I do just want to give patrons another final shout-out for your support over the last 7 years. Thank you so much for all your support. It's been amazing and you've been brilliant. Thanks for your kind words again. Really do appreciate them. But yes, there you go. That is it for the race reaction to the Italian Grand Prix. Next up, Baku in a couple of weeks' time. Then, of course, we've got Singapore directly after that one. Please do drop a like. We're 9 away from 200. Come on. There's got to be 9 of you that have forgot to do it. There you go. Please do drop a like before you go. I massively appreciate it. And subscribe as well so you can join us on our journey, the next chapter of the F1 word. Now, I will be back on Tuesday. Yes, I know, right? Weird. Yes, channel memberships are a thing, Cat and Segway. They are still a thing, but Patreon has closed, so that's the difference there. But yes, I will be back on Tuesday with what I think we're going to call winners and losers. I'm going to pick out 3 or 4 winners and 3 or 4 losers from the weekend and then give some thoughts on that. So that'll be out on Tuesday, all being well. New things to learn, of course, on the way, so we'll see how we go. And then, of course, I think we'll be having the news roundups coming back as well. So that'll be the end of the week too. Probably Saturday morning, I think we've decided. But that'll all get confirmed over time. So keep an eye on social media at F1 Word on Facebook and Twitter. And, of course, the F1 Word over on Instagram as well. Like I said, likes and subs, all of that business. And thank you for your company this afternoon. Looking forward to Baku. I think we've got one hell of a season between now and the end of the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.